Hello, and welcome back to Wisdom in Action, the podcast where we explore what it takes to bridge the gap between knowing and doing, because that's where the real wisdom is born. I'm Austra, resilience coach and podcast strategist, and I created this space to have honest conversations with real experts to bring you practical insights you can apply, not just think about. Today, we are joined by Terry Tucker, speaker and author on topics of mindset and self-improvement. He's been a college athlete, basketball, right? I
Right.
also played basketball. A SWAT hostage negotiator, and now a sought-after speaker on mental toughness and personal excellence. Terry, welcome to Wisdom in Action.
Austra, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Likewise. So to start us off, what is one piece of wisdom that changed everything once you started applying it?
So in 2012, I was told I was going to be dead in 2 years. And I looked at that and said, okay, you gave me a death sentence. How can I turn that death sentence into a life sentence? And I've had a pretty interesting life before I got sick in 2012, before I got cancer. But I always say I've probably done more living in the 13 years that I've been dying than I've done in my entire life. And like I said, I've got a lot of things that I've done in my life. You mentioned I was a college athlete. I was on a SWAT team as a hostage negotiator. So it was really understanding. I think when you get to the point where you accept that you're going to die or that you're already dead, that you really can live because you don't have the parameters that are on you any longer. You don't have those things like, oh, that's dangerous or I shouldn't do that. It's like, you know what? I'm dying anyway. What does it matter? Let's do it and let's see what happens. And maybe I'll enjoy it, or maybe somebody will benefit for it, or maybe it'll just be fun. So that's probably one of the biggest things in the last 13 years that I've kind of come to understand about myself and also about life in general.
What do you think helped you to realize that? Because I think being faced with death is something that can I think it's there was the saying of you live or like your life starts when you realize you have only one life or something like that. And I think it's such a important reminder, but I think a lot of times we have to be put in a place to have this awakening about it. Is there a way how to have this realization that you had, which is so powerful, without having to face death or death sentence for people that might want to be living now, or they might need this reminder, or they want to have more fulfilled lives?
I think there is. I mean, we're all going to have difficult times, hard times in our life. And I don't think and I don't like to use the word suffer. I think suffer depends on what you do with the difficulty you have in your life. But I think you need to find meaning in your misery. I don't believe any of us goes through difficult times or hard times or suffers in vain, that it just happens. There's a message there. There's something you're supposed to learn from this event, from this situation. And the problem is I think we get all caught up in ourselves. And for me, and I've seen this not just with cancer, which is what I have, but with other people, that their disease, whatever that is, whether it's a mental, emotional, physical, their disease isolates them. I mean, initially, I think it isolates them from their friends and then their family. And if it goes on long enough, it isolates you from yourself, from who you really are in your life. So I think finding that meaning in your misery is really what's important in life. There's an author here in the United States, a man by the name of Ernest Hemingway, wrote some great books, but wrote a book called Farewell to Arms. And it's a semi autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in that book that I absolutely love. And the line is this: life breaks everyone. And afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So just like if you were to break your arm and a doctor would set it and put it in a cast, when that arm healed at the area where that break was, it would be stronger than the rest of your bone. That's the metaphor for life, that life is going to beat you to your knees from time to time. But if you can keep going, if you can keep moving forward, if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, you will emerge from that tunnel a stronger and more resilient individual.
There's so many things I want to touch on. I knew this is gonna be good. It's already gold. One thing I can comment on when it comes to isolation, because I think one thing can be disease, but also one thing that I experienced was I would go through binge eating for like, I don't know, since I was like 10, 12 years old. And a lot of it happens in isolation because there's so much shame. And also, as you gain weight, you can't really hide it. So I would see how I would start to, in some ways, isolate myself where I'm like, well, I'm too fat to go there or do this or whatever might be the case. I was always active, but I would be like overweight. And and with that, I could see how I started to isolate myself. And with that isolation, you start to feel lonely, you start to feel miserable, you start to feel even worse about yourself. And also I have through the especially last few years, I have experienced how important is the connection with others, where every time that I go back home and I visit family, I feel like my whole nervous system gets regulated and I get back and I'm chill, I'm calm, I'm ready to get to work. And but at the same time, as you go through that, did you experience that isolation with your diagnosis or is really like at any point in your life? And how did you manage that? Because I think it can be so hard to, especially first few steps to get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're first told that, you have a terminal illness, you're gonna die. You all kinds of things go through your mind. Our daughter was in high school when
Mm.
I got sick, and I went through. I guess I'll start with this. I went through all the stages, I guess, that we would associate with grief. First, it was denial. My father had died of cancer when he was 54, and when he died, and that was shortly after I got out of college, it was like, I'm going to do everything right in my life. And I had done everything. I was an athlete. I worked out. I ate right. I got enough rest. I reduced stress. I didn't abuse alcohol and drug, all the things we know. And I did that. And then here I am at the exact same age as my father when he was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And it was, first it was denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then there was, just a madness, of I was mad, I was upset, I was ticked off. It's like, wait a minute, I've done everything right in my life. How can I possibly have cancer? And then I got to a point where, like I said, our daughter was in high school. There was sort of a bargaining with God. It was like, look, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. This is a very uh, couldn't be a very difficult time in a young woman's life as she's, coming of age. Things are changing in her body and her mind and her spirit. Let me be part of that. Let me be there for her as her dad. And then I absolutely got down, got depressed, felt sorry for myself. And then I just came out the other end of that and was like, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I do not like the cards that I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability with the understanding that, yeah, this is probably going to take my life, but not today. And
Yeah.
today's all I got. Today's all any of us are guaranteed. This minute, this moment, we don't, tomorrow's gone. Yeah, tomorrow's gone. The next day, nothing. There's no guarantee that we're going to be here. There's no guarantee that I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. So yeah, so there's that isolation of, oh my gosh, all this stuff is going through your mind. And then you realize, or at least I did, that now I'm focused on me. And I still get that way. Don't get me wrong. I'm still treated for tumors I have in my lungs. And when I go through those treatments, I have a very bad reaction. My body shakes violently. I throw up. I have a headache. I have a fever, and I'm just depleted mentally, physically, emotionally. But when I get to that point, I'm looking inward. It's woe is me. Look how bad this is. Look how terrible it is. And I find a very simple way to get out of that is to go do something for somebody else. Pick up the phone and call somebody else I know who has cancer. If I'm sitting in the waiting room waiting for treatment, somebody comes in, they got that deer in their headlights look like, oh my God, this is my first time here. I'm scared to death. Am I going to die? Is this going to work? What are my side effects going to be? How do I how am I gonna handle this? And just to wheel over them to them in my wheelchair and say, "Hi, I'm Terry. How you doing?" And it's like somebody sees me. Now all of a sudden, I'm not focused on me, I'm focused on somebody else. And I'll end with this. There's a professor at the University of Chicago here in the United States, a psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students. The idea is you go out, you get on a bus, and you sit down next to somebody, and in 3 questions, you go deep with them. So you sit down next to somebody, first question, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" Question 1. And I'm just making this up. Question 2, "What do you do for a living?" "Oh, I'm a doctor." Okay. Question 3, "Have you always wanted to be a doctor?" It doesn't matter what they say. They could say, "No, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened." Or my mother was a doctor, but died of breast cancer when she was 40. So I'm honoring her memory by being a doctor. Whatever they tell you, now they're telling you their why, their mission, their purpose in life. And we don't go there with people. We don't understand people's mission. Social media lets us stay on the surface. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. We don't go deep with people. I love going deep with another human being.
I can really relate. That's partly why I'm doing this podcast. uh, Question on purpose, because I think, especially I see this a lot with younger people, which is partly what I'm trying to do with the Chase the Impossible, is to help younger generation with. There's so many things that I have seen that we're going through. One is the social skills. With all the technology and everything, we actually are struggling with social skills and actually connecting with each other. But also, it's that sense of purpose, or you see everybody else's perfect lives and you feel like you're behind or you're not good enough, or you're now expected to have this perfect highlight real life, which, by the way, none of us have. We all are human. But we forget that when you're literally bombarded with all these, like, everybody's perfect lives, and rarely, if ever, they show behind the scenes of what it actually takes, or what are some of the struggles, or anything like that. And then on top of it, it's kind of like you're expected to know what you want to do when you're coming out of the school. Like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life when you haven't even fully formed your personality yet? Do you have any advice in finding that purpose or connecting with it, and also connecting with it without listening to the external pressure on what you should do?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there. I guess let me say this. I was one of those people. I mean, I went to college. I went to college on a basketball scholarship. I'm going to say this, and I'm actually kind of ashamed I'm going to say this. I went to college to play basketball. I didn't go to college to get an education. I went to college to play basketball. Education was a byproduct of what I got from college, but I went there to play basketball. And so that's who I was. I saw myself as a basketball player. But the interesting thing is, and I wish I would have known this when I was younger. Um, you kind of, and I'm going to phrase it in a little bit different way. We kind of all put these like arbitrary mileposts out there in our lives where we say, by the time I'm 28 years old, I want to be making $100,000 a year, or by the time I'm 35, I want to be in a serious relationship or married and have children, or whatever it is. And you're right. We get to those mileposts and we haven't met them. I'm not making $100,000 a year. I'm not in a committed relationship or have a family. And we look at ourselves and say we're a failure. And I heard a guy talk about this. His name is Jeff Wetzler. And I wish I would have known this when I was younger. But he talks about looking at our lives in decades instead of those arbitrary mileposts. So he says in your 20s, do everything. If anything interests you at all, do it. You want to go jet skiing? Go jet skiing. You want to go parasailing? Go parasailing. You want to go to a play, a symphony, whatever, go do it, and make mistakes all along the way. Make all kinds of errors, not for the sake of making mistakes, but for what you learn from making those mistakes. And then he says in your 30s, find those 2 or 3 things that you absolutely love, that you absolutely enjoy, and dig into those. And then he says in your 40s, when you're more established, you're more mature, you have more money, all the kind of thing, you were talking about your sort of your prefrontal cortex getting to a point where it's developed, where we make good decisions for ourselves. When in your 40s, find that one thing and really dig into it. And then he says in your 50s and your 60s and your 70s and beyond, you will reap the benefits of everything you did in your 20s, your 30s, and your 40s. But if you look at your life in decades instead of those single events, I want to be married, I want to be in a relationship, I want to be a VP of sales, whatever it is, it's a much better way of kind of pushing down that, oh, I'm a failure. Oh, I haven't met those things. No, you got 10 years to figure this out instead of one particular event. So that would be one thing I would say. And the other thing I guess I would say on this is we all think, we look at purpose in our life as one thing, as a singular event or a singular thing we're supposed to do in our life. And I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for myself. I think that word should be plural. Purpose is. So when I was in college, I felt literally my purpose was to be an athlete. And then when I got into law enforcement, I felt my purpose was to be in law enforcement, to be a police officer, to be on SWAT. And now, in all honesty, as I'm probably coming towards the end of my life, I think my purpose has shifted again to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can. So I think purpose is great. And if you can find it, that's super. But how do you find your purpose? What are your unique gifts and talents? What are you good at? Know what you're good at, and then go do things that you find interesting. And if you don't like it, then do something else. And I'll end with this story. There's a guy by the name of Jeff Wetzler, and he's the editor in chief of Entrepreneur magazine. And Wetzler got out of college and went to work for a small newspaper. And he didn't really like it, wasn't really motivating for him. He wanted to be an editor. So he went to work for a company and learned a certain form of editing. And then after a year, he quit that company and went to another company and learned a different form of editing. And then after that, he quit that company and went to another company and got more information, more knowledge in a third form of editing. And then he finally got to the point where he was the editor in chief of Entrepreneur magazine. What we don't do is we get comfortable in our job. We get to a point where we've learned most of it and we just stay there because it's comfortable. We're making decent money. If you really want to find your purpose, keep learning. And you mentioned curiosity. Be curious in your life. Ask those questions and move forward. And I think you will find your purpose or purposes in life.
And I think important one is to follow that curiosity, because a lot of times there are certain things that you feel internally drawn to. One thing that I have seen is that this black and white thinking. Like I had one coaching client where she was in her 40s and she was like, "Oh, when I was younger, I was dancing, but now it's too late." And I'm like, "Says who? Like, says who that it's too late? Can you move? If you can move, you can go to classes, you can do dance. Even if you dance at home, you can still do it." Because in her mind, it was like, and I have seen this so much with that black and white thinking. Well, if I now do it, now I have to do it professionally. I have to do it at the highest level. And for me, it has actually has I have really similar story with kind of like two things. One is basketball. Because I didn't play basketball for like 10 years until last year. I found a group that was just meeting up to play for fun. I joined them. And then there was one girl that came and she said that they're putting team together for like amateur league. And I was like, okay, I would want to play. Like I haven't played in 10 years. And I joined that. And even going through that experience, it was so interesting because when I was playing back then, first of all, I didn't see how good I was. I would literally wake up at 5 a.m. every day just to train myself extra time. I did my own programs since I was like 10, 12 years old. A lot of it was coming from insecurity, and I was waking up at 5 a.m. not because it was all 5 a.m. club. That was the only time when there was nobody out. And I was so insecure about the way I was running. I was like, nobody can see me. And I remember I was running and I would like look behind the corners because it was dark outside. But that's kind of how soon enough, I was the only player playing all game with no breaks because I didn't get tired because of the workouts that I was doing. But I didn't see how good I was. I even had a chance to uh, do tryouts for the national team. But I had this mindset that, well, I won't get in, so what's the point trying anyways? Like I didn't see how good I was. And now it was really interesting. It's kind of was like healing experience going through that where I was playing and I was like, first of all, I'm just having fun. But also I didn't have like insecurities or anxieties, anything like that. I was more so like managing everybody else's emotions, which also for me was interesting with like the psychology and everything. And then also I was like, oh, actually I'm pretty good. And the other one was, and also, do I plan to go pro now? not really. I'm just playing for fun. And same thing with triathlon. Like last year, I signed up for a half Ironman with only 90 days of prep. I have
Mm.
no background in the sport. I have never done triathlon. I hadn't even been on a road bike by the time that I signed up. I only had finished like 3 half marathons in super slow pace as well. So I was like, I don't want to wait a year because it was here where I am. I'm just gonna sign up and kind of I was using the concept that I came up with, commit before you're ready. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna commit and I'm gonna see if I can do it or not. I'm gonna see it on the race day. But even if I don't finish it, because I had literally 3 episodes where we were walking through with my friend, like how I got to signing up, because there was a whole story behind that. Then the 90-day prep and then the race day. And we were talking about how she said that I was anxious before the race. And I was like, actually, I wasn't. I was just in a place where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to finish. I just don't know. I'm going to find it out tomorrow. But it was so interesting to go through that because I didn't feel anxiety. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, like, will I finish? Will I not finish? And it's so much unknown. I had only done like 2 open water swims as well before the race. So I was trying to pack everything within 90 days. And usually it takes like 6 to 8 months to prepare for it. And even going through that experience, one is I wouldn't have known what I'm actually capable of. And for me, it was less about, oh, now I'm becoming triathlete, because everybody is like, oh, are you going to be triathlete now? Not really. Like, I don't plan to do that. I still want to do full Ironman because that is my ultimate impossible that I had for the longest time. That's why this year I want to do the marathon, and that will be the next stepping stone towards that. But it was interesting thing that even like when it comes to the purpose, for me, what it was about is that I am chasing my impossible. I thought that I can't do it. Literally for 7 years, like 7, 8 years ago, I was in personal trainer courses where there was one guy who I made him Ironman program. And I remember thinking, oh, it would be nice, but I can't run. Like I just can't run long distances. That's where I was. And when I watched movie Brittany Ren's Marathon like a few years ago, I was like, well, if she can do it, I probably can as well. So literally instantly found the program online, started to do that. And first workout was 4 times of 1 minute run, 4 minute walk. I was an overachiever. I did 5 times, but you run literally like 5 minutes. But even through that, it's sometimes you find, and I'm actually curious in your perspective about it, how sometimes we find purpose in our pain or in some of the things that we might seem as struggles. Have you experienced that with yourself or people that you're working with?
Yeah, I used to always say this to my daughter. My daughter is a lot like you. She played basketball, fortunately or unfortunately, got my height and things like that. Played in college, and I always just tell her, think bigger, think big. Whatever your dreams are, think bigger. Get outside that, because usually what our dreams are things that, yeah, I think I can do that. Do things that you don't think you can do. Like you said, when you were doing this, you pushed yourself to see how far you could go. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try to do this and see how far I can push myself. There's a woman here in the United States. She's married to a guy by the name of Jesse Itzler. Itzler is part owner of the Atlanta Hawks in the
Yeah, I
National
love
Guard.
it, sir.
And Sarah Blakely is the woman. Sarah Blakely started a woman's undergarment company called Spanx. And Itzler tells this story. He said when his wife started Spanx, and it's a multi-million dollar company now, she had one prototype and $5,000. She had been a door-to-door fax salesperson. We don't even use faxes anymore. Or for the most part, we don't use faxes anymore. She didn't know anything about distribution, about human resources, about legal, about manufacturing. Didn't know anything. And the point he was making was, wherever she was, she started right there. At that point, jumped in and learned it as she went. The problem with most of us is, I think we feel that when we get to the top of the mountain, that's when we've arrived. That's when life starts. And what people don't realize, it's the journey to the top of the mountain. And the other thing I'll say about this is, people seem to think that they start at like A and they continually just get better and better and better and better and better and get to Z. That's not life. That's not life at all. And you know this from basketball, and I know this from basketball. You're practicing. Yeah, you get better, but then you plateau and you don't get any better. And you may even practice harder and you get worse. But then you plateau again and then you go up. You're moving always toward that ultimate goal, but it's not linear. It's not a straight line. It's, up, plateau, down, 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 plateau, up, plateau. That's what life is all about. And what people don't understand is what really life is all about is that whole area of getting better, getting worse, plateauing, getting better, getting worse, plateauing. The journey that you have and the people you take that journey with.
Okay, there's several things that I want to touch on here because this is very, very valuable. Um, First of all, one thing that I remember like a few years ago, I did a 5-day challenge, and in there I had a few slides where I would have a lot of people ask me like, how do you not lose focus? What do I do to not lose focus? And I'm like, surprise, surprise, you're gonna lose focus. Like you will lose the focus. But what matters is how quickly you gain it back, where your goal is every time to have that space in when you're off, have shorter and shorter. And the goal is to get back to it quicker and quicker and quicker. And because you will fall off, it's part of being human. None of us are perfect. But then I think what happens if we have this expectation to never fall off, now that we do fall off, we have this terrible story about us. I'm a failure. I'm this. Like, this is not meant to be. It's like we're expected to have everything perfect with the first attempt, especially at things we have never done before, like building a business or starting something new or a hobby or family. It's like we have this expectation that it has to be perfect, and I have never done it before. And but one thing that I wanted to talk about was how to navigate those plateaus and those valleys when you're going down, because I think it's logically, sure, makes sense. Easier said than done though, because when you're at that going low and you feel like I have been doing everything right, I have been taking steps, I have been showing up, I even like let's say when it comes to the training and everything, I have been sticking to the diet, taking care of my sleep, everything, and I'm not improving, or I'm even getting worse, or something happens that doesn't go according to the plan when like you try to build a business or whatever might be the case. How to navigate those plateaus and especially the downs.
Yeah, that's a great question. And if I knew it definitively, I'd write a book about it and go retire, in Jamaica or something like that. I guess, we get to like, I'm not seeing results. I'm not getting better. I'm not improving. And I would add one word to those three sentences. Yet. You're not doing it yet. And really the difference between the people that make it and the people that don't are the ones that say, you know what, I'm working my butt off here and I'm not seeing any results, so I'm going to quit. That's a small-minded person. Small minds and weak people kill big dreams. So if you can just say, all right, oh, this is hard. I'm not seeing the results, but I'm going to try again tomorrow. And if I don't see results, I'm going to try. It's you against you at that point in time in life. It's not you against your coach. It's not you against your teammates. It's you against you. Just being able to say, I'm going to try tomorrow. Because I know if you know you're doing the right things, like you said, you're getting the right rest, you're getting the right nutrition, you're practicing, you're doing the things that you know are going to get you to that place. You've got to have hope in your life. You've got to have the hope that you will get there. And I'll tell you a quick story, true story. It happened back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University here in the United States. There was a professor who was doing an experiment with rats. And as soon as I say rats, everybody's like, "Ooh, you're going to tell a rat story?" Yeah, I'm going to tell a rat story. So he took rats and he put rats in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water before it sank and drowned. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And then the rat sank and drowned. And then he took another group of rats and put them in that exact same tank of water. But this time he watched them. And just as the rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took those exact same rats and put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, On average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Now,
60.
60 hours. Think about that. First rats died after 15 minutes. These rats, because they had hope, thought that, you know what, if I can keep hanging on, I'm going to get rescued again. He's going to reach in and grab me and pull me out. So 60 hours, which taught me two things. Number one, as I mentioned, the importance of hope, but also number two, just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. So when you're tired, you can't go on. I don't think I can do this. You're only really at 60%, or excuse me, 40% of your maximum, and you have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So just because your brain says, this hurts, it's uncomfortable, stop it. We know this from marathon runners. You know this from running all these ultra things that you do. You hit that wall and you're like, oh, your brain's like, it hurts. I can't go on. I can't keep moving forward. But you know that if you can, you will get that second wind and all of a sudden you'll have more energy and you'll be able to push forward in your life. So many people quit because they listen to that voice in their head that tells them to.
Yeah, I think big part of it also is our perception towards the negative, because I think I'm currently in a place where I kind of seek that discomfort. I do winter swims, I do these endurance stuff, and especially with running, I don't like the word hate. I usually say I dislike it with passion. I don't like it at all. um, but that's partly why I do it, because it's something I don't want to do. And the way I look at it is by putting myself in uncomfortable situations or getting over myself in certain ways or taking certain steps that I don't want to take. In some ways, what I'm doing is I'm preparing myself for life, because there will come a time when life gonna hit me and I don't know when or how it gonna look like at what time. Like, I can't predict that. The only thing that I can control is myself, my strength, and especially the relationship with myself. Because the one thing that I have learned, I had somebody ask me or tell me that I need to make a program about navigating uncertainty, because that's a big one. And I was like, I have never considered that. And then I started to think about what is about it, because even moving here, I moved here. I literally came to visit my friend. She kept asking me for like 7 years to come visit, and I always had an excuse. So I ran out of excuses, and I was like, okay, I might as well come and visit. And while I was here, I was like, oh, I kind of like it here. And we started to talk about, like, she was like, well, if you moved here, we could do this and that. And I'm like, slow down. I'm just I'm just considering. I'm just here for like a weekend. And then pretty much like after I got back home, the next day she messaged me. She was like, hey, if you want to move, I have a friend who's looking for somebody to rent a flat. And I was like, there was like two things that I was, or like, I don't know how many, but there was this thought that I had. I want to associate myself with somebody who's successful. And I associate successful people as people who make big decisions quickly. And I'm like, okay, this is my chance to do that. So within a few days, I was like, okay, I'm in. And like 2 months later, I moved here. And I would have people message me like a month later. They're like, how are you doing? How are you like getting used to everything? And I'm like, I was fine the first day. Like, I'm fine. But then I was thinking, why? Because it is not a small thing to do, to move to a different country. And I realized that it's because, and they also had no certainty. It wasn't like, oh, I have this stable job that is waiting for me. Like, there was nothing. I literally just started my business. Like, there's no stability at all. And one thing that I realized is that it came back to my ability to think, because I think a lot of times what happens with certainty is we, first of all, we have regrets before we have even made decision. That is so, I see it so much, and it's so funny and ridiculous at the same time. We haven't even made decision when we already are like, well, but like, what if this happens, and or whatever. But then one thing that I understood is that I have built my relationships at a point where I know that once I make decision, whichever is the outcome, because a lot of times we can't control the outcome. It can be good, it can be bad. I got myself, I will figure it out. And that has come through going through enough of bad experiences and mess ups and failures where I was like, oh, I survived this. I thought this is it. Like, I'm done. I had to go back home or whatever. Um, survive that, survive this. And then through going through those experiences, which is a really interesting concept. Andy Russell was talking about how he was learning the guitar, and his teacher was, "Oh, you need to be more patient." And he's like, "How do you be more patient?" Well, you need to do things that require patience. And I think it's the same with resilience. We want to be resilient, but we don't always want to do things that require resilience. But that's really how we build it.
It is, and I wish I could remember the name of the movie, but Morgan Freeman is in it, and he's talking to a woman in character, and he said, if you pray to God for patience, does God give you patience, or does God put you in a situation where you can be patient? If you pray for success, does God give you success, or does He put you in a position where you can be successful? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. It's doing those uncomfortable things every day. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. But I always, like you, I try to do something that scares me, that makes me nervous, that makes me uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing every single day. Because I know if I do those things, when it's time for me to go to treatment for my cancer, which I hate, I'm going to use that word because I'm going to use hate.
Eh,
I hate going to that. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. I know it's going to be a difficult day, but doing those uncomfortable things every day prepares me for when life hits me with having to go to treatment or having to have my leg amputated or my foot amputated or whatever it ends up being in my life. I don't ever look at that like, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to die. There's nothing. No, I'm going to give it everything I have. And if the end result is I die, okay, that's fine. I have a very strong faith in God. I win in the end. Whether I succeed or I die, I still win in the end. And there's the basketball coach at Duke University here in the United States, a woman by the name of Kara Lawson, who does, you can YouTube this. I don't know exactly what it's called, but she's giving kind of a pep talk to her team. And she talks about how we tend to think, like when we're in college, okay, if I can just get through this quarter, things will get better or things will get easier. If I can just get through practice today, things will get easier. And her point is life never gets easier. You just learn how to handle hard better.
and you get stronger. Like it's something that I remember I had this clip that I have cut of myself talking from one of the episodes, but it was something that it was I explained it as the metaphor of game, where if you play the game and you go through the first level and at the end you have this big monster that you're fighting against, and if you lose, it's not that you lost and you're back at ground zero because you already have experience. So you already can navigate some of the things already because you were there before. And it's so easy to get to that. Oh, actually, this is a big one. That what if it's a waste of time? That is something that I hear so much is especially if something that somebody might feel naturally drawn to do. Let's say somebody is an artist and they feel drawn to make music and they have this thought of, yeah, like I want to do it, but what if it's a waste of time? And or what if it's not worth it? And it's kind of we start to look at we measure everything just based on the end result, and that end result we focus on the negatives instead of, well, what if you feel the best you have ever felt and you can express yourself and maybe it takes off? Why not play both what if games?
Yeah.
What? Yeah, go ahead.
But no, if you constantly say that to yourself, you will absolutely not do things. That fear will ground you and you're like, nope, nope, can't do it. I don't want to do it. And the thing I found interesting was, and I'll use a basketball analogy since you and I both are basketball players. If you took a basketball and you went out onto the court and you shot free throws, if you could look at your brain under an MRI, there'd be a certain area in your brain that would light up while you were shooting those free throws. The interesting thing is, if you thought about taking that basketball, going out on that court and shooting those free throws, that exact same area of your brain would light up. And Bruce Lee is a martial artist, died many, many years ago, but he had a great quote. And he talked about be very careful how you think, how you talk to yourself, because we all become what we think. If you keep telling yourself, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, eventually you're going to hardwire your brain to the point where you're right. You can't do this because you've told yourself enough you can't do it. Why not go the opposite direction? What if? What if I can do this? What if that, I can shoot 10 free throws in a row or 100 free throws in a row? What if? Because that's giving your brain an opportunity to be successful versus the other side where you're absolutely shutting down any success and you're going to be a failure and then you're just going to whine and complain. And very few people in life take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness.
Yeah, that's actually very. What do you think that is?
Because honestly, I think a lot of people are afraid of succeeding. They're like, what if I get this? Oh my gosh. You know what? It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be hard. There are going to be long nights, sleepless nights, a lot of worry, a lot of stress. I don't know if I want that. People don't, I think a lot of, yeah, that looks cool. I want to be that person or like that person or have what that person has, but I don't want to do what it takes to get to what that person has or where that person is in their life. And I think it's fear. It's, kind of like what you were saying. Why did I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and practice? Because I didn't want anybody to see me. I thought I ran funny. I thought,
Yeah.
whatever. But the fact of the matter is you did it. And when I was 13 years old, I was 6'5". I was skinny as a rail. I had to run around in the shower to get wet. That's how skinny I was. I mean, I had a size 13 shoe and my ears rivaled Dumbo in the Disney movie. I had these great big ears. I got teased and bullied mercilessly because of that. But I took that anger and distraught and I put it into practicing basketball. And the more I practiced, the better I got. And the better I got, the more I wanted to practice. And that led me to the point where I went to college to play a game that I love and got an education for free because I didn't kowtow to those people and say, "Oh, woe is me. Look, I'm being." No, I found something constructive to put that ugliness into that made my life better in the end.
How did you know to do that at that early age? And it's something that I wanted to ask also about that, what you said that, um, where is it? That sentence to life sentence, because it's such a it's such a mental shift and it's so powerful. And I don't think it's the first place that people would go to, or even any, not even like the fifth place they would go to when it comes to literally facing death. But even like with the bullying, do you know why you went to that? Oh, I gonna use this anger and apply it here instead of now making it mean something bad about you or having these negative stories or beliefs. Like what was it?
I think it was a couple things. One, basketball is one of those sports that you don't need anybody else to play with. All you need is a hoop and a ball. It's not like, I guess soccer would be one of those sports too that you could do that with. But, here in the United States, baseball or our American football, you need other people to be able to practice and play. Basketball, I could do by myself. And I like that. It's like you, I'm going to get up at 5 in the morning and do because nobody's around and nobody's going to mess with me and nobody's going to talk to me. And I'm just in my own little world. And I liked being there. I liked being in my own little world. And my dad and my brothers and I had built in our backyard, not a half court, but similar to a half court. I had a hoop. I had a place to
Nice.
play, and I could go out in the backyard with nobody around, and I could just practice, and I could play. And and I think the other part of it was, how did I get from a death sentence to a life sentence? It wasn't, I just woke up one day at it. It was, I went through all those stages of grief that we talked about. And then I got to a point where death death doesn't have that hold over me. Like I said, I have a very strong faith in God. So even if I die, I'm going home. I'm going back to the creator who created me. But if I live, if I can take this ugliness, if I can take this pain, if I can take this difficulty and make something of it, it will inspire, it will motivate, it will encourage other people to say, you know what? If he can do it, maybe I can do it too. And that goes back to what we were talking about with those connections. Can I have those deep connections with other human beings? I don't have all the answers, Austria, but I have some things I've learned along the way that I love to offer to people. If it works for you, use it. If it doesn't, develop what works for you and use it in your life.
I have a question about resilience. How does resilience look on the hard days? Because it's also like with your story, it's not like you're now on the other end, everything is perfect. You're still going through it. How does resilience look on the hard days, especially if it's like years or decades into it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 13 years into this. I found out in the last couple weeks that I have another malignant tumor in my stump, and I'm going to have to start on Monday in 2 days. Um, an immunotherapy drug that actually scares the heck out of me. The side effects could be life changing in terms of what they are. And the question is, should I do this? And I've thought about it, and I go back to the Bible verse from Saint Luke that says, you know, who amongst you by worrying can add an extra hour to your life? We can't. I mean, when I die, my expiration date's already stamped somewhere. I don't have any control over that, but I do have control over how I approach this. And it's like, okay, this is going to be another setback that I'm going to have to figure out a way to deal with. And so is my family. I don't do this in a vacuum. I have people that help me through this. So, how are we going to do that? It's like, really? Again, I'm going to have more surgery. I'm going to have more, can't I just get a break? But I think, I've said this on other podcasts before, I honestly believe that God is using my infirmity, God is using my cancer to show people his love, his mercy, his goodness, his wisdom, his protection, his healing. And if God wants to use me in that frame of reference, I'm good with that. If that's what my purpose is now, to show God that, you know what, or to show people that, hey, God's giving me this. He'll give it to you too if you ask him for it. That you can handle your trials, you can handle the difficulties in your life, and they don't have to be life threatening like cancer. You could break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or the plane you're going on vacation gets canceled, or somebody else at work gets the promotion that you deserve. We're all going to experience difficulty in our life. It's how you approach that. It's, do you take that and say, you know what? What if? What if I can overcome this? What does that look like? And who can benefit from it? And let me end with this story, another true story. There was a nurse who I met many years ago who was about 25 years old. So a relatively young nurse, was already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit where I was treated. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came in and she said, Terry, I want to tell you a story, but I don't know how to tell it to you. How do you respond to that? It's like, well, I hope you decide you want to tell me because I think I would enjoy hearing it. So she's in and out over the next couple hours and then finally comes in, sits down. She's like, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see what you go through. You go through these terrible reactions to your medication, but you come back every single day. You never take a day off. You never quit. And she said, and then when I was caring for you, I went back in your file and read everything. You had your foot amputated, you had your leg amputated. You went through 5 years of interferon therapy. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. If she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had a positive impact on people. So anybody who's listening to us out there who doesn't think your life matters, who doesn't think that you can be an inspiration or a motivation to another human being, I promise you, there are people out there watching how you handle your adversity in life and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So understand your life matters and how you conduct yourself can make a difference in somebody else's life.
I love this. Like, I have a few comments on there's something that I heard some time ago about the heart that we're given, that if we weren't able to handle it, we wouldn't be given that. And and even with There's something that I have seen with, I think when you go through, and in your case, you go through like terrible things. In my case, the extreme is kind of like created voluntarily, even like with
Mhm.
my cold swims and all that. When people see me in the snow, just like freezing my ass off, they I could see it how a lot of them it's kind of when they see you going through this hard thing, it's like they give themselves permission. Well, maybe I can do this cold shower for like few seconds. Or if they see you fighting through your disease, they might be, well, maybe I can do this uncomfortable thing that I have been afraid of. And them seeing you show up every day, you go through it and you still are one of the highest energy people that I have met. So you could never tell what you're going through. And with all that, it's something that I think in some ways, by the way you show up, you give others permission to show up for themselves in their lives in some capacity. So I think it's really, really beautiful to see. Before I ask you the last question, I feel like we could talk forever.
Sure.
Um, what is where can people learn about you, connect with you?
Sure. So I have a website blog called Motivational Check. So if you go to motivationalcheck.com, you can leave me a message there. And I love hearing from people. I will respond as long as it's in English because I don't speak any other English. And people sometimes respond in another language. I'm like, I don't know what they're saying. Sorry, but I will absolutely respond if you go to motivationalcheck.com.
Love it. And you have a book as well?
I have a book called Sustainable Excellence that I actually wrote after I had my leg amputated. And I have a new book called Four Truths and a Lie that should be out by the end of this year.
Love it. So last question have for you is what is one piece of wisdom you're still learning to live?
That's a great question. I guess let me give you this because sometimes I try to isolate myself. I know what I can do and I like that, but and again another piece of advice that I wish I would have known when I was younger, and it's this: it's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people who care about you, find people that are willing to invest in you, find people that want to see you succeed, hitch your wagon to those people, and climb your mountains together.
That is really powerful message. I echo that. It's for me, I have actually experienced it with even when I moved here, like that's the first time when I actually experienced what a real friendship is.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, we're not, we don't have any scores or anything. It's
right,
just like, oh, I help you to be your best self. You help me to be my best self, and we don't try to force each other's lifestyle on each other. It's just about how can I help you to be the best you, and what is it that you need, not what I think you need.
right.
So it's very, very powerful. Well, Terry, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I'm sure I'm not the only one who got a lot out of it. And if people listening, if you're somebody who's 20 plus years experience, wants to come on the podcast, share your wisdom, there'll be details below. And if you want to start a podcast, want to get on more podcasts, or need help managing your podcast, there'll be information below as well. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.